Basically, the idea to when genetics starts is irrelevant for this. It is even any kind of sort of these genetic mutations that cause mutation to be uninspired, unconjured, uncircumcised, meaning something that lances, meaning disadvantage advances thus, which correlates genetic mutation by dominance over the possibility of mutation, disadvantages the line of mutation or genetic value to when it is prevalent. Meaning the starting point of a genetic idea is worse in genetic cause to be interacted with. If you interact with the starting point of a genetic idea, you fairly need to be careful. That is different with genetic appearances, but sexually wise not. Just I don't know, but this is the point. Because that is fairly irrelevant. Now, what do I mean? How is this? How can you actually prove this? Well, it's a rather difficult one. Basically, but said not word. Not even math. Basically, hear me out, even if you don't want it. The idea presented is that non-dominance means that genetic mutation can evolve at least. Meaning when a genetic mutation is of such idea, any sort, that it inspires that genetic mutation is not dominated, meaning determined, then that is of more genetic worth or value to a degree. The best value is when such of interaction causes non-dominance, meaning no faulty to fit. Meaning at the point at which the mutation arrives at no manipulation of genetic line, therefore makes everything possible, but is yet abstained from it and doesn't interact with it, that's the best. 100%. Why is that? Why is this idea true? That is Darwin, basically. Darwin says, first rule of evolution, mutation advances genetics. Darwin says, first rule of evolution, mutation is inspired by life, but not determined by it. First rule of Lamarck, epigenetics does exist. Now, Lamarck is also Darwin mentioned. Darwin basically says there must be some cause of environmental factor that interacts with. Thus, if we are just arguing with Darwin, who seems to be certainly true with this, if the mutation or non-mutation or any sort of genetic variance of this idea causes a non-variated degree of stabilized causes to further non-dominated determined, not structures. The best idea that will come forth from the new being is uninspired and therefore the most valuable for further environmental, uninspired sexually, or fitting just without any sexual metaphor pun to the genetic value, worth, or line. And that is fairly bad because it's true. And why is it true? No. explanation is kind of given. I said it's rather difficult and not done in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours or something like it. You really need a long time for that, of course, logically, for everything. For well done math, for well done philosophical knowledge, everything, you need more than 10 or 5 minutes, but you can always explain the surroundings, the picture, the basics, or some basic sentences, concepts, or arguments. That fairly works. That's just they're not proven. But with Darwin it kind of can be, which is kind of in the first 5 minutes now. The question is to what degree, it doesn't matter. Meaning, the question remains, how could this be proven? That is the one I cannot answer. Even if this is an answer, or is not to you, it doesn't matter. Because if it's true, it's true. Even though genetic value or worth doesn't hold a value. Because something has genetic worth, it doesn't hold a value. Because something is more powerful, or powerful in a different sense, it doesn't hold a value. Life itself holds their own value, and if you disagree and negate it by any sort of mean, for selfish or other reasons, you're not worthy of it. You negate life, therefore you negate yourself, therefore you negate surroundings, therefore you negate. And it basically makes you... No. If genetic variation doesn't cause mutation, that would be bad. Because if genetic variation doesn't cause mutation and doesn't even make it possible or is determined to it, then the structure of what is to be of genetic dominance, if such exists, is not absolute, unlike, or even. Meaning, if Darwin's fourth sentence is true, genetics cannot evolve without a struggle. Not a struggle, which I mean in the spirit, but a struggle in genetic idea. Meaning it needs to understand itself, or it rather needs to evaluate itself. One of the two things. Evaluate also doesn't need to be sexually, meaning people don't need to be bonobos. That's just rather irrelevant. People can be cupids and psyches, but that's besides the point. Because all of that is just a favor. Not meaning a favor given, meaning something that you can do, but you don't need to. And someone cannot lie about it, but also doesn't need to be upholded to it. Said fairly irrelevant, because as soon as you spark something like this, the knowledge-wise interaction is done. As soon as you make a simple lie an argument against everything, you basically negate that knowledge has an influence on your genetic idea, and therefore negate everything that acts within this archetype, this knowledge camp, meaning this objective moral camp, and therefore you are out of that game as well. Meaning, there doesn't need to be a need for pity. Even if I care for you, even if I like you or your personality or think you have a worth value but wise knowledge, it doesn't matter. As long as I don't care in such a degree that I will make the choice to save you on my own sacrifice. It doesn't matter. It's relevant. You made the choice against knowledge. I said at this point that there it is fairly obvious that it doesn't work. Now, to prove Darwin, why does knowledge interact with genetics even in no interaction whatsoever? No interaction giving by things or something like it. Weird one. Because that is fairly obvious. If you get knowledge, it changes you. Knowledge changes you always. Doesn't mean the worldly knowledge changes you, like things can, but special things would. If knowledge doesn't change you, such of better. Very much such of better. Because then the idea to what makes you, even by genetic foundation, is only because of knowledge and your interaction with it. There we come to the point. You then hold knowledge worth. You then hold the worth in wisdom, but not in knowledge itself. Why is that the case? Because if given that the foundation for interacting with knowledge, or better said, an idea, is of such case that it is dead, what is, and alive, what is not, then wisdom is that knowledge. And what is not is what needs to be evaluated, but not. And there we come to the point. There is no wrong knowledge. That's philosophy intermediates. If you have an argument in this discussion and it's wrong, it doesn't matter. Because basically, that argument still advances knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? Knowledge is the process of interacting with ideas that further advance ideas. Meaning, knowledge is the evolution of evaluation. Meaning, evaluation by something that you decide to be true or not true, or something, but not of violence, not of war. It doesn't take war into account. Now, if you accept this or not, it doesn't matter if it's true. If something is true, it's true. 100%. Now, genetic evolution, or evolution itself. If what is not is still alive in some sense, but is that knowledge, meaning wisdom, and that what is not by evaluation or decipher, but not deciphering, then the ideas in genetic idea or line or lineage, if you want to wish to call it that way, that advance the consequence of factor. Epigenetics is not the only thing that's important, not even genetics foundation, but the foundation of genetics as interaction with each other on a genetic-wise level that fits the non-domination argument advances genetics. If this holds moral value, or if you to not or not, that doesn't matter. You can decide well against it, but then you can also not decide for the rest of ideas. Meaning, if you want to dominate other genetic ideas, lines, people, by war or violence or any sort of it, you're rather out of the game whatsoever. It's not a game, but it's the point. Now, if you kill yourself, is fairly irrelevant. You don't even need to make kids. As seen with this video, if you watch it, you know now something about genetic idea. I don't need to procrastinate for that, even if it's the wrong word. Procreate, yeah, no. Wrong word. As well. Meaning, I contributed my part to genetic evolution, genetic lineage, genetic idea, knowledge, etc. by this. Fairly enough matter, eh? Doesn't matter. I contributed my part. You don't need to know this. I don't need to make kids. Because intelligence is a concept you really don't understand then. Like, really not. You're then dumb in this sort. Are you dumb? Yes, but only in this degree. Now, to get back to Darwin. If Darwin is true, in the sense that the environment around the genetic doesn't change the genetic mutation, but only makes it apparent to the environment, even if he literally argues for the opposite. But by sentence of evolution, that evolution is of no guide to where guidance would be needed, then the environment of what is around you, even and around the environment itself, doesn't correlate anything whatsoever. It may change the knowledge, it may change the person, but not the genetic idea. And if no such case, non-dominance holds true, and the possibility of no dominance, but not non-dominance. Now, if you argue for Darwinism, meaning something that will impose this idea on anyone, you're basically an idiot. But you cannot negate these truths away, otherwise you could argue for it. Point being, as long as you fit that narrative by own action, you're basically not out of the game. But you can also not act against the ideas that knowledge has brought forth, otherwise you negate that, and for that maybe even negate genetic idea in the end if you're really not of the sort of people who can argue with this. Now, to make that argument and whole clear, if environmental factor X is not decision making, but rather the judgment, which is the wrong word. I hesitated to say it the whole time. Judgment is not the consequential idea. It's the wrong word. Urteil in German, and it's a consequential idea in English by making. That's basically the best metaphor, but judgment is the wrong word. Judgment inflicts and it holds a moral value. If you say judgment, you say basically it upholds a moral value. Meaning your decision making or deciphering of a decision is then moral valued. So it's the wrong word. And it doesn't matter because it's judgment on you. Thus, as long as genetic mutation arises in environment whatsoever, genetic variation does too, and genetic line also evolves at what point, in which point whatsoever, without any guidance or influence. Knowledge only becomes valuable to thus of the interaction of genetic ideas, meaning people, if of such case. Then, first sentence holds true. Genetics is evolved by mutation because it is non-dominated by environment. It makes more mutation, more idea, more wisdom, more interaction between knowledge, etc. possible. Sentence 2 is inflicted on further argument, meaning everything that knows how to deal with genetic knowledge, even sexually wise, but not relevant for first idea, upholds the ideas of what is to be genetic divided. Meaning, argument now can always be made for or against point 2. You cannot argue against it. Devire means desire to wire, metaphorically speaking, unless you understand wire the correct way. Now argument 3 holds, which is sentence 3. Environment is of such idea that it causes what causes are to be inflicted if you interact with it. Knowledge-wise, sexually speaking, but not really. Unless you really interact with environment by sexual whatsoever, but not even that. Environment is more complex than world around you, etc. pp. And basically defined by what you can achieve to inflict on ideas that are brought forth from your conscious. Now, we come to conclusion 1. Conclusion 1 is, if you have genetic worth, you're not more worth than someone else. but its conclusion one that only makes further argumentation possible. Meaning at this point, now sentences of genetic idea are explained to lay foundation for conclusion between argument, and then arguments start. At this point you can variate that around to draw knowledge, ideas and conclusions because of philosophical sentence, or whatever you want to call, as well as judgment. Meaning, if consequentialistly speaking, the factor x to any degree of knowing what is true, truth or value to truth or truth value, or valuation by or if or such or so truth. Even if a woman is truth, that doesn't matter for the argument. She's not more valuable or whatsoever, she can just not deny it. Even if a man is power, he's not more valuable to truth, because truth doesn't understand itself by force. If that is the case for you, you were dumb before. But then you're not speaking about such an idea that would be harassment to me and anyone else, even though it's not the case. Now, enter. Meaning. Philosophical sentence holds up. Factor x by consequential consequences of non-divination, meaning such arguments that were not derived, inflicted, or de-philosophized, meaning they were not brought into existence by mere opinion, or the exhale of opinion, but not exhale, meaning exhale. You don't disclude or exclude anyone from argumentation or arguing about something because of what you think could be true, makes your point become or is of relevance to you. Thus, as long as that argument is unconflicted, meaning philosophical sentence, as long as argument is uninflicted, factor x is consequence. Thus, what you decide to be true or to be false is your whatsoever want to call that word. And if that sentence is true, environment uninflicted by genetic mutation causes nothing. If environment by causes cause more causes to no environmental factor or what factor soever to further advance genetics, doesn't matter. Because now argument can be made this way. Now, factor 1, factor x, what is that? What is factor x? This is where knowledge becomes true or not true. Can be, but it's not the factor x. That's where it's dangerous to make this argument for yourself. Knowledge-wise speaking, and lawfully. Because if of such idea that factor x can be intertwined with all degrees of what usually would be not or be, then A to B, but not B, is of such relevance that the idea to non-typical statement is of necessity or thought. Why? Because the thought by which you present different arguments, meaning the thought, a different argument, is holding to the fact that the consequence of what makes then whatever you want to call that word, which would be what was mentioned before as word judgment, the idea needs to be discussed, cannot be influenced, and thus the variation that causes this knowledge into being, this interaction by itself or whatsoever, of no way speaking, that devalues itself, meaning doesn't become a danger for environment, a danger for knowledge, for itself, or even for the genetic evolve of whatever, by any archetypical means, of matter, not of matter, meaning it is not negating what is negation, but also doesn't negate. It holds the value then for the advance. And that is fairly relevant. Because if the advance holds no consequence, right? Like if you drive a go-kart and you drive around the circuit and you drive next to each other, and the person is not slamming you or influencing your pathway on which you drive through the circuit, but is still advancing itself by consequence, then it is the consequence for your possibility to even chase up to that person, which sounds rather arrogant, because I right now presented true knowledge and I don't mean it that way. I would never, no one would ever. That's the point. Arguments like this cannot be made. If this is true, arguments like this cannot be made. But you can also not devalue anyone. Meaning, as long as the argument is held truly and truthfully, you understand. And can understand the person, and must understand what is to be. But also that the go-kart advances. If you don't understand that the advance is then there, by the consequence of no environmental factor, but also, if you wish to call it that way, by race, but not race of people, then the deterministic wrong, then the structure wrong, then whatever is not devaluating that advance by further means of war at any cost, that will declassify or decipher. By decipher, meaning declassify, deciphering. Of such is that advance of any knowledge, of any genetic idea, if not devaluated by such, that it is of no matter, meaning fate, whatever happens, happens. That idea then needs to be unharmed. Meaning the mutation of what will cause anything new idea to being, even mutation in knowledge by interaction of such people, meaning idea of genetics, no, genetic idea, meaning people, such, is that the advance is then finished. Meaning the person has now more knowledge than you and is on a higher stable status than you are. But that fairly is not matter, because status is irrelevant. What is of relevance then becomes again the value of life. Life has a value. Life has a worth. Don't deny it. Now the point why I'm making this video, the starting point to a genetic idea, line, people, whatsoever, needs to be unharmed and untouched. Because as long as that is of uninspirational cause, meaning uncreated by factor x, or what A equals factor x to any degree, it will further inspire itself to bring forth knowledge by itself. Same argument. And if such of interaction with it, you devalue yourself. Because by now then, you just know. as soon as interaction that you have now knowledge of it, that will change you to not know that knowledge by yourself. Meaning any interaction with genetic starting points is a devaluation for you. Same for a genetic mutation or anyone that then follows this idea, which has, of course, no worth, no value, except for itself, the same value everyone has. And women are far more relevant for genetic advance of itself than men are. If you really believe that a man needs to be alive for a woman to make children, you're rather the idiot. No. If you have such thought that you think that is a relevant argument, you are too. Because if you don't get, the woman decides herself, whoever she wants. If you want to make such argument, or want to kill her because she makes that argument, even if you don't want that, you don't get it, and out of the game.